Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the January 18th, 2024 SFO Airport Community Roundtable Technical Working Group. I'll call the meeting to order at 3:36 p.m. We are meeting in person at the Foster City Council Chambers Conference Room and virtually via Zoom. And joining us today are staff to the roundtable: Kathleen Wentworth, Roundtable Coordinator; Ted Gonzalez, Administrative Secretary, San Mateo County Planning and Building Department; Jean Rondale, HMMH Technical Consultant to the Roundtable. We also have with us, Kathleen, why don't you go ahead and tell us the list of everybody else?
With us here in the room today, we have Bert Ganoung, San Francisco Aircraft Noise Officer Manager, and Chief of Staff to Dave Pine. Supervisor Dave Pine is Linda Boland here present. And then the members of the committee for roll call. Oh, we need to do the remote people.
Kaya,
Redwood City.
from Redwood City.
Thank you. And joining us remotely today are Joseph Bert from the FAA, who's going to present our first presentation. We have, shall we say, Jean Rondale is here remotely. And we, of course, have Moifer Chin, who's our Chief Community Engagement Officer from the FAA. And some folks joining us from the public, which we'll talk with you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kathleen. Then let's go ahead and move on to roll call, please.
Roll call: Sam Hindi,
Here.
Judah Pasco, Terry O'Connell. Terry may be joining us remotely just as an observer later on.
Okay.
Ricardo Ortiz, not present. So we have two.
Just one?
No, Scott Egan.
Yes, but I mean from
Yeah,
the
yes.
subcommittee.
Yeah, except for you.
Correct. Okay. Wonderful. Then, before we go ahead and get started, I would like to acknowledge that we are on the unceded ancestor homeland of the Hermitage Ohlone, who are the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula. As indigenous stewards of this land and in accordance with their traditions, the Hermitage Ohlone have never ceded, lost, nor forgotten their responsibilities as the caretakers of this place, as well as for all people who reside in their traditional territory. As guests, I recognize that we benefit from living and working on their traditional homeland, and I wish to pay my respects by acknowledging the ancestors, elders, and relatives of the Hermitage community, past, present, and future, and by affirming their sovereign rights as First People. Thank you. And join us just now, our Vice Chair, Al Royce. Al, welcome.
Thank you.
And next item, you're going to be moving on to public comments for items that are not on the agenda. Staff will note written comments which have been received and will allow members of the public to speak on items not on the agenda. Members of the public who are present and have turned in speaker slips will be heard first, followed by members of the public joining remotely. Ms. Gonzalez, will you please explain how the public can participate in today's meeting?
Thank you, Chair Hindi. For those attending in person, there are speaker slips at the table by the entry door. Please fill out one and indicate which agenda item you are speaking on or whether you are commenting on items not on the agenda. Give the speaker slips to me. When your name is called, you will have 2 minutes to speak. For those attending the meeting on the Zoom video conference, we will use the raise hand feature in order to organize any public comment. During the general public comment period, and for each item on the regular agenda, I will ask those members of the public who wish to comment to click the raise hand feature to speak on that agenda item. For those joining by phone, please press *9 to indicate your desire to speak. When you hear your name called, I will prompt you to unmute your microphone and inform you that you may begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes. Please note that members of the public must wait for the prompt in connection with each agenda item before using the raise hand button. Written comments submitted in advance will be acknowledged by staff during discussion of the appropriate agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez. I don't see anyone present here that would like to speak. Is there anyone online on Zoom?
Yes, we have two, Chair.
Two public speakers.
Pub-
Let's go-
not two, I'm sorry, Zoom.
Yes, so we have two. Let's start with Ms. Yapley, Darlene Yapley. Would you please unmute Ms. Yapley and allow her to speak? Welcome, Ms. Yapley.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Roundtable members and attendees.
Ms. Yockley, hold on, I'll turn on, the timer. Hold on, okay? You can start speaking.
Good afternoon, Roundtable members and attendees. The Aviation Noise and Emissions Symposium will be held March 4th through 6th in Palm Springs this year. You can attend remotely or in person. Keynotes include Santa Clara's Supervisor Chavez, a national leader in the movement to end the use of leaded aviation fuel, and authored the proposal to begin closing Reed Hillview Airport. And Peter Kirsch, an aviation lawyer who presented several years ago with Kathleen Wentworth at the aviation meeting hosted by former Rep. Spear in San Mateo, which many of us attended. 3 community advocates will be speaking from the Bay Area. Marie Jo Fremont with the Concerned Residents in Palo Alto. So she will be covering a community-centric representation of noise impacts and what they could look like. Tammy Mulcahy with Sky Posse Los Altos on best practices and recommendations for fly quiet programs. And thank you to Bert as one of our interviewees. I will be speaking with Don Scotta of FAA on our joint noise policy review webinar we did as an example of community engagement. There will also be updates from the FAA on the noise policy review, and the website has many more speakers such as researchers, airports, and EPA. Search on ANE Symposium for more information, or please contact me at info@aviationimpactedcommunities.org. One word. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yapley.
I have, one more, Mary Jo.
Good afternoon, Ms. Fremont. Just give us a moment. Once you see the timer reset, go ahead and get started.
Okay, let me,
Don't worry about the timer. I'll give you the time.
hold on. I just need to unmute her.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I have two GBAS related questions as a follow-up to the Roundtable meeting of December 6th, in which the Roundtable recommended continued processing of the GBAS Group 2A approaches. The first question is, did SFO submit some GBAS Group 2A approaches to the FAA, and if so, which ones? And the second question is SFO planning to run some tests to measure the potential speed brake impacts of OW2 at side-by, as suggested by the City of Palo Alto? To clarify, these tests would not be full tests of an OW2 GBAS approach like the United Airlines tests that were done a couple of years ago. These tests would be simpler. The tests don't require to follow a GBAS approach. The test flights could just be vectored by air traffic control for a portion of the flight path that would emulate the new conditions at waypoint, eddy, and side-by. Thank you.
We can't hear.
We can't hear.
I think when Maria unmuted Marie Jo, she might have muted hers. Because that happened around that time.
I'm
Check one, check two.
Got it.
We
We
got
it,
audio.
okay, all right. Okay, so I'm sorry, did everybody hear Mary Jo?
Yes, we could hear we just couldn't hear the room.
Okay, you didn't hear me. Okay, what I was saying is, as you know, as comments that are made on items that are not on the agenda, we are not legally allowed to comment, but your comments were taken and staff could respond to you if there's any information to provide. And I'm sure SFO as well will do so at their convenience. With that, I'm gonna go ahead and move on to the first item on the agenda, which is performance-based navigation and environmental processes, which will be presented by Joe Bert, Team Manager of FAA Western Service Center. Mr. Bert, are you ready to go? Thank you, Joe. Please go ahead.
I am. Let me share my screen.
You can put in some take questions side by side.
Are you guys seeing my screen yet?
Yeah.
Yes.
Joe, may I interrupt for a second, please? Will you be able to take questions after your presentation or during your presentation, or what is the format?
Yeah, I can take questions anytime. I'll stop at the end of the slide and see if any of the members have questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. For those of you that don't know, I know some of you, but not all of you. My name is Joseph Bert. I am the team manager here in the Western Service Area Operations Support Group. We basically provide services to air traffic and to the regional administrators on the West Coast. I oversee the correspondence, environmental, NASA analytics, and correspondence team, which I already said. And that's kind of what I oversee. I have I think 14 people that work for me or under me or with me, however you want to phrase that. Yeah, we're pretty much hit the whole gamut from environmental to analyzing flight tracks, all of that stuff. So those of you that I haven't met, nice to meet you. And with that, I'll get started. So today I'm going to go over the performance-based navigation, which we refer to as PBN. And then kind of the environmental process and how those two kind of merge together. And then after that, I'll kind of step you through I'll kind of show you the IFP gateway from your guys' side, which is kind of part of the PBN thing. But that way, if you're not familiar, you'll kind of get an idea. So with that, I'll go ahead and get rolling. So PBN process. So FAA Order 7100.41 outlines the process for this. Okay, so this refers to area navigation, RMP, SIDS, RNAV SIDS, RNAV stars, the RMP ARs, which are approach procedures, and then we have some RNAV routes, which we refer to as Q routes, T routes, Y routes, Z routes, and TK, which are particularly for helicopter. We have some of those in the CONUS, but most of them are up in Alaska and those area. So one thing I want to specify here is we're talking about RNAV procedures. So like your Big Sur, your Modesto arrivals, the Gap, and the Mullen, those are all what we consider conventional, which the major difference is ground-based to basically GPS or not ground-based. Some people consider it like satellite-based, but that's the main difference here. So we're talking about the satellite-based procedures, not the conventional process. Although it is somewhat similar, but it is not exactly. So here's the different phases. Phase one is preliminary activity. So that's
Joe?
yes.
Pardon my interruption.
No worries. Sorry.
We're noticing the slides aren't advancing. Are you controlling those?
Yeah, they should be. Let me see if what's going on here. Okay, how about now?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Does that work?
Yep.
Works.
Okay,
Yes.
so I'll stop here. This is the slide that I went that apparently wasn't there. So I'll give you a minute just to kind of digest it. And again, this is the process document and then what the PBN actually covers.
Okay, thank
I
you.
have a question.
No worries, sorry about that.
Kathleen has a question. Go ahead, Kathleen.
Oh, go ahead.
Before you change slides, Joe, just a quick question. By not mentioning it, I'm guessing that the PBN process is not currently being planned to be used for new entrants, drones and eVTOLs and all that kind of stuff? Or
I
what's the
don't-
plan for them?
I don't think that we even know where that's going to go.
But it's not going here yet.
Yeah, so I don't think they've gotten that far in the whole process development. So I don't have an answer for you, Kathleen. Sorry.
No, that's great. Thanks, Joe.
Yep. Any others?
No, I don't see any. Go ahead.
Okay. All right, so this one is the PBN phases. So you have preliminary, so you have phase 1, which is preliminary, phase 2, design, phase 3 is development and operational, 4 is implementation, and then 5 is post-implementation. So preliminary activities, it kind of lists them there. I'm not going to read every one of them, but you have feasibility, conceptual designs, and then we have the option for community engagement under that phase 1. Phase 2, kind of what it talks about: design, procedure testing, simulation, community engagement activities is an option as well, and distribution packages, which means the procedure is finalized and they're packaging up to send to the environmental. Developmental and operational, that's the AIS, which is the Aeronautical Information System. They're the ones that do all the charting and the publication and the QA and the flight check coordination and all that stuff. Then you have facility operational preparedness, which that could be letters of agreement. It really just depends on what's going on. Map updates on their screens or their scopes, could be numerous different things. Industry, so that would be like preparing to have their systems updated to get the new procedures into their boxes or their communication system, like navigation, I guess is the best way to describe it. And then you have pre-implementation coordination and community engagement activities here. Then once we implement, we send a team out normally to the facility and they're observing the procedures to see how they're working, looking at, are they working? Are they doing what they wanted to do? Are there changes that need to be made? All those things. And that's done by the Go team. And then you have the post-implementation, which is they continue to monitor, report, and then make adjustments if needed. And then again, we would have community engagement activities. If we had them before, we would have them again to let them know what changes we're making. And then we would close that out. So how they kind of merge is under design, under 2, the design, that's normally where environmental starts getting involved and where the process starts for the environmental review. So I'll stop there. It's a lot of stuff. I'll stop there and see if anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Joe. Any questions on that slide?
I do.
You do?
Mhm.
Kathleen?
Joe, a couple questions. As I would understand it, prior to number 1, the preliminary activities, is that where we would see the instrument flight procedures gateway process play in, or is that sometime during number 1?
It
Or
would
is
be-
someplace else?
It could be number 1, but I would say it might be at the back end of number 1. It would be more like between 1 and 2, maybe even 2, before it becomes public. It would be in the system prior to that, but outside entities from the FAA would not be able to see that it's there. Is that what you're asking?
I think so, yeah. So if I could just take for example, and I'm not asking you anything about the status of this, I'm just trying to understand and have people understand the importance of what this does for us to understand this. And that is, we submitted a proposal for I'm gonna call it an alternative surfer proposal for during the nighttime hours, which would take airplanes basically up the valley, from Los Angeles area, and take them so that they would come and connect with like a Quiet Bridge Visual or one of those kind on the other side of the bay and into a 2-8 right arrival to keep them away from our southern San Mateo County and northern Santa Clara County folks. So that was entered into the Insurance Flight Procedures Gateway. So does that mean that it's in the step number 1 process?
Yes, that would be step number 1 where they're doing the validation. So they're going to need to get with air traffic and oops, sorry, I advanced the slides. They're going to need to get with air traffic, make sure air traffic thinks that, yeah, it's possibly doable right off the bat, right? There's a couple different people, the airport, obviously we get with them and we say, hey, you guys have any issues with this? It's not an approval. It's not a denial. We just want the airport to kind of look at us and say, yeah, you know what? We don't have any issues at this time. Let's, we're okay with it moving forward. And then it moves forward and then it goes to air traffic. They look at it, determine, and then it may need to go to a preliminary industry look, that type of thing. And then once it makes it through all those channels and they get assigned a publication number and date and all that stuff, then that's when it usually would show up on the gateway.
Okay, that makes sense. And so then, and not necessarily for that procedure, but a procedure like that, you've got an option of community engagement activities. And how would that fit into a process such as that?
It really just depends. There really isn't a whole lot for us to do until the design's final. And then even then, there's not a whole lot to do unless we're doing like an environmental assessment or something way bigger environmental review where we would, like an EIS, we would come out and take comments before we even had designs, right? We would say, hey, we're looking at making these amendments. What would you like to see? And then we would take our comments. So it just depends. Under the everyday normal practice, we would not engage the community until after the environmental was complete. If we engage, there's nothing that says we do or we don't. It's just kind of the feel of the community engagement officer, the regional administrator, the airport, the roundtable, all of that stuff.
So is there any way that the community can proactively provide you information during phase 1?
The thing is, I don't know that they would know about phase 1. Because we get entries from anybody, everybody, air traffic, industry, the airport, all those folks. So I don't know that necessarily the public would know that we've received that to make a comment, unless it came from like the roundtable or something. Obviously they would know, but like, that's a oddity more than it is a norm.
I see.
So let me,
Yeah.
go ahead. No.
I was gonna go on to number 2, so.
So in this, okay, I know you didn't want to ask specifically on the roundtable, so let me, if I may, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but in this case now, since the public has been informed, could they follow up on Kathleen's question? Could they submit input?
Sure, they could submit to the roundtable. They could submit comments. You could submit a letter to the regional administrator saying, we've received XYZ comments on said procedure. They could send something directly to the regional administrator or the community engagement officer, and with their comments, and then we would make sure that those would get there as well. So there is a couple avenues to make comments.
Wonderful, thank you. Kathleen, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
Joe, just a quick question, and I don't want to get off topic here, but could you just quickly explain to me what the environmental process that takes place in the design phase?
Well, the environmental process, the only thing that they would really do is when they're developing procedures, we like to have an environmental specialist there. They could say, hey, no, if you put it over this wildlife area, we may have some difficulties moving forward. or, you know, if we know there's historical properties that have quiet as a I can't think of the word right now, attribute, then they would be able to tell them that. So they kind of help kind of weed out some of the issues that they may have if they put the procedure where they want to put it. A lot of times we'll have the CEOs, or we've been trying to have the CEOs more involved as well, so they will know hopefully where the most activity is when it comes to the flight tracks and people having issues with where the aircraft are flying. So all those things are kind of part of that design process that they take into consideration during the development stage.
So there is an environmental specialist as part of the team that is in design phase 2 that will look at this and provide input. Number one, I guess what I'm hearing you're saying. And then number 2, environmental, that I assume that includes noise primarily. Does it also include any other environmental aspects?
So yes, and I'm going to get into that later.
Okay.
But to give you a short answer, yes. So it would be consultation. If we had to do section 106 or 4F consultations, which is historical property, national parks, wildlife, all of that stuff, all that stuff would be part of that as well. But as far as when we're designing, none of that is happening. All they're really doing is providing input and you know, thoughts. You know, hey, if you go here, it's going to be, you know, we may run into some issues with the environmental. You know, I don't know for sure, because, you know, they would say, I don't know for sure, because obviously we don't have the final design and I can't do the runs and I can't look at all the software that we need, but they can give them an idea, right? Like, hey, if you're going to go over this national park at 6,000 feet, yeah, more than likely, we're probably not going to be very successful for that, right? So
Yeah.
Those are the things that they talk about. They don't give them specifics, but they just let them know, hey, if you put that line there where you think the aircraft are going to go, we may run into some environmental issues. And so our thought process is that at that point, they would be able to make some of the changes needed to help with the environmental side. And then the community engagement officer, we've just recently started getting those guys involved, or gals. And so we're hoping that as that flows, they would be able to provide similar ideas, thoughts, right? Like, hey, you know, we need to try to avoid this area if we can, you know, if we can make it work. Sometimes we can't, right? And we just have to go with what it is, and we deal with it on the backside once everything's finalized and environmental's done. But you know, we're trying to find ways to catch these things in the design aspect of it, once we're done, and then we run into issues. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. I appreciate it. And I just wanted an overview. You've answered my question, so thank you.
No worries.
Okay. Anyone else? Kathleen, one more.
Just a quick question, Joe. So I get that the environmental people have specific tasks, specific prohibited areas that they could probably find on a map. But do I understand correctly that these environmental folks who are sitting in are not going to have a map of the residences in the Bay Area, for example? So although they might be able to help you out with info on 6,000 feet over the national park, they're not going to be able to help you out with 6,000 feet for a new path over my house, for example.
Well, we have maps, Kathleen, but I don't know. It really just depends on what the environmental impact is. And at the design phase, we're not going to know that. We're not going to know that going over somebody's house at 6,000 is going to cause major or noise impacts until we're done with our environmental review. So it would be kind of hard for the environmental specialist to say that. What they would say is, hey, that area or that community or that area, you know, has issues. Is there issues with aircraft noise? Is there any way we can help mitigate some of that? And like I said, sometimes we're able to, sometimes we're not. A prime example is, I can't remember where it was, Monterey, I think it was. We weren't sure which one worked, so they built 3 different arrival procedures in. We got with the airport, we talked to the airport, We worked with the community engagement officers, and we kind of narrowed it down to which one they thought would be best and have the least amount of impacts. But that's kind of a one-off. So I don't know. I'm not sure if that answered your question or not, but I mean, they'll have where these aircraft are going, and they can bring up some of the stuff to look at environmental justice, stuff like that, but they're not going to get really deep in it because the design isn't even final. So where they start out with that line doesn't necessarily mean where it's going to end there. So they just provide what information they have readily available or that they can look up really quickly, and provide that to the team. The in-depth stuff, flying over my house at 6,000 feet, that's all going to be done after final designs, and it comes to the environmental team.
Okay, thanks, Joe.
Joe, just to make sure I'm clear, that would come to the team in the implementation phase, or is that after all 5 phases? When does the community weigh in on that if they have some concerns?
So it depends on the situation. They can weigh in as soon as it goes public on the gateway. They can send comments, like I said, to the roundtable, to the CEO, to the regional administrator, that type of stuff. It really just depends, but there really isn't necessarily a guideline for public engagement. It's really just when we work collaboratively with the airport, the regional administrator, the community engagement officer, and sometimes the roundtables, to come up with a plan and determine whether it's needed or not needed. Because some changes we do, there really isn't anything that the community needs to be aware of, like note changes or something like that, right? So it just really depends on the situation, and we try to get all parties involved and engaged to make a determination of what that community engagement piece looks like.
And so I guess we're relying a bit on the community engagement officer to sort of take the lead in helping us if it's appropriate or not appropriate, where we weigh in, meaning there would be an impact or not.
Yeah, and you have the airport as well. So, you have Bert and his office and all of them that are involved in the process as well. And also don't forget, we have the NCI portal. It's not called that anymore. It's called something else now, but basically the noise portal. And, we can plot where all those noise issues are on a map, and bring that map to the work group as well. Right. And, as they're developing, see if there's anything we can do to alleviate the noise issues that we've received. So we have a bunch of tools that we try to incorporate in the design process.
Okay. Thank you. Again, I didn't mean to get us off track, but I appreciate the feedback.
Joe,
No worries.
quick question, very quickly. I don't need long answer. But once it's published on the gateway, what's the process or the normal, is that get communicated to the stakeholders, like for the roundtables and the airport, or we have to initiate going in and finding out?
So I'm going to kind of cover that a little bit. You can sign up for notifications,
Okay.
where they notify you to any changes at San Francisco. And, we're working with the CEO and the roundtables to at least communicate what procedure changes are happening in the future. And then, work together to figure out whether it's something that we want to bring up or whether, it's nothing that this roundtable is really concerned with. So again, we're still working with that. We have the airport as well that we work with, right? And so there's all those.
Thank you. Kathleen?
So Joe, hearkening back to the IFP gateway, however, whenever that gets posted there, that's a notification, as I understand it, that the FAA is looking at a new procedure and for San Francisco, for example. But I don't believe there's virtually any other information available to us about that. Now, if you're talking about modifying an existing procedure, they tell you that, I think. But if it's a new procedure that's being proposed, as I understand it, and I've tried to write to the comments section of the IFP gateway, and I get a comment back saying basically, this is not for you, it's for stakeholders, and you can't write to us, especially not listening. So when something is coming, is known to be in the IFP, in the process, when can the public see what the design is for the first time? Because it's not at the IFP state. So when do we get to see the design?
I don't think that they're going to be able to see that till towards the end. So that's where I think you guys would come into play, honestly, is where you would see something come up on the gateway, and then you would get with the regional administrator or the community engagement officer and say, hey, can I get information on this? And then we would give you brief information on what that procedure change is, and then make the determination of whether we need to do more.
Okay, that's great to know. Good.
Thank you. Anyone else?
That's us.
Appreciate the answer, so please go ahead, proceed.
All right, so this is the second and third phase. So as we talked about, we kind of already went through some of this. Environmental review process happens, community engagement. Again, we usually wait till the environmental's done. And then aeronautical information. Once that's done, we send it to the AIS Aeronautical Information Development Team. They go through it, they look at it, they do a QA process. Then it goes to flight standards for review, and then flight inspection. And then after that, it gets implemented. And that's pretty much the PBM process in a nutshell. So I'll kind of get into this in a little bit when I go to the gateway page. But like I said earlier, you know, an entry comes into the gateway. It has a few steps that it's got to go through. It's got to get validated by the flight procedures team. And by validated, I mean, they look at it and go, is this something that we can even do, right? Does it meet criteria? Do we understand what the request is? All of that stuff. Then it goes to, if it's not, it goes to the airport. They look at it and say, yeah, we don't have any issue at this time. And then they kick it forward, right? Or they'll be like, hey, we don't have any issues, but we want to know more about it once you get a little bit further along. And then also once we stand up a work group, then after that, it goes through air traffic. If they're good, then we determine that we need to stand up a full work group. Then they stand up a work group, which would include the airport. It would include CEO. It would include industry, air traffic, all of those folks. And that's where the development would happen, is during that full work group. So the airport's involved pretty much from the time it enters until after the design phase. And then, you know, normally we would brief them if there's any concerns or anything like that that we know of. And then they would do the counter, right? If they hear some issues or whatever, they would reach out to us and say, hey, no, we don't like this, or we need to change this. A prime example is down in California off LAX, we were making a procedure change down there. And LAWA, Los Angeles World Airports, felt like the change was a little bit too close to the shoreline. So they asked us to look at it again and try to move it a little bit further off the shoreline to alleviate some of the noise in the El Segundo area and all that. So we did that. We worked, we went back, we looked at it, went back to the drawing board. So it's just a collaborative effort to try to meet what the airport wants, what, you know, air traffic needs, and the communities as well.
Thank you. Any other questions on PBM? From members? Seeing none, let's go ahead and proceed.
All right, so now I'm gonna go through the environmental process. So again, the primary mission is safest, most efficient aerospace. Compliance with NEPA and other responsibilities is a very important part or integral part of that process. We can't move forward with any procedures unless we complete the environmental. We have the environmental done. It meets the requirements of NEPA. So nothing moves forward without that. Obviously, like the next paragraph, we comply with procedures and policies in NEPA. We also have some other environmental laws, regulations that we also have to follow. CEQ is another one. FAA decision-making process must be considered and disclosed the potential impacts of the proposed actions and its alternatives, which could be no action alternative, and the quality of human environment. So NEPA was actually signed into law on January 1st, 1970, for those of you that don't know. And I'm sorry if you know this, I'm just kind of giving kind of a kind of in-depth review of it. So the review must be completed for actions reasonably foreseeable effects to human environment, whether the actions are taken by the agency itself or by other users of the airspace. So by that, they mean Department of Defense. Now we're getting into commercial space. So you have some commercial space stuff going on. So all of those things, they have to be ran through us because that's basically what our responsibility is. So a lot of times we'll have Department of Defense will do their own environmental, and then we'll take their environmental, look at it, and then we do our own. We basically adopt theirs and do our own little decision document as well, just to make sure that we meet our requirements and theirs. So the NEPA process ensures that the FAA understands potential environmental impacts of the proposed authorizations, fully discloses the potential impacts to human environment from the proposed activities, and evaluates the reasonable alternatives to the proposed activities. So that's the other reason why we think it's important to have the environmental specialist in those meetings, because they would be able to know why things didn't work, why they did work, criteria-wise or design-wise, and all that stuff. So now we'll go over the levels of review. So CADEX, which is the lowest environmental review you have, basically there's no significant impacts on the environment. So we're able to do a CADEX under NEPA. And that's, I would say, probably what 90% of our flight procedures, instrument flight procedure changes, amendments, and new fall under. EAs, so that's the next level. So if you can't meet a CADEX, then we have to move to an EA. So if there are some potential impacts or circumstances, then we move to an EA. An EA basically, you know, provides a deeper dive, evidence analysis, documentation, and then we would submit, you know, it just, I'm trying to think of the easiest way to explain it. It basically goes more in depth than what we would do with a CADEX. So an EA would go more in depth. We usually do some type of noise modeling. We have usually we do a bigger outreach. So we get, you know, the communities will have a say on the draft document, then they'll have a say on the final draft document. So it's just a little bit more in depth and thorough than what a CADEX would be. And then an EIS is basically, if you can't meet the CADEX or the EA, then you would do an EIS. One of the major things is if you have environmental impacts that you would not be able to mitigate. In other words, we can't change move a procedure to mitigate them, or, you know, whatever else is out there to mitigate. If we're not able to do any of those, then we'd automatically have to do an EIS, which is an environmental impact statement, which this one is like super in depth. I have personally never seen one done in the FAA, at least on the West Coast. I know that there's some out there, but I have not seen one done. Usually we either mitigate it, find a way to mitigate it, or we just don't move forward with it because the EIS is just, it's pretty big and in depth and takes a lot of time. I think we have 2 years now to complete that. So it's a big pull for the FAA. Let's see. Okay, so this is kind of a flow chart of how we kind of go through things. So you have,
Bert,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I have a request. If you could go back to the last slide, the previous slide.
This one?
One more backup,
The CADEX one.
CADEX.
Yeah.
So Joe, to understand this CADEX, could you help me understand the standards that are used in reaching a decision that no greater environmental review is required? So what numbers what's the metrics of it? Is this the one where you look at the people living in the 65 decibel contour and apply a a certain amount of increase in the DNL decibels?
No, at CADX, we do noise modeling, we do noise modeling, we look at the section 106, the 4F, to see if there's any impacts there. We look at 4F is the national parks. Those are the main things we do. And if there's no impacts there, significant impacts, then that's what we move forward with. If there are significant impacts when we look at those categories, then we move to an EA.
So, so you look at noise in the modeling, it sounds like?
Well, yes and no. So we have different noise metrics that we use. So we have some tables that we use, and it basically goes in steps. You go to this table, if it passes, if it passes, you go to the next table, if it passes, that type of thing. Or if it fails, so you go to this table, if it fails, then you have to go to the next table. If it passes that table, you're good. If you go to that table and it fails, then you got to go to a noise screening. So there's different steps in the noise process that we have to go through. And then if we have significant impacts when we do our noise screening, then we automatically have to go to an EA, and then that's where we would do a more in-depth environmental assessment.
So you do a noise modeling, you look at all through these runaround charts, and somehow that can take you to a decision on whether an EA is required.
Correct.
Do I have that? Okay, so then these charts that are the determinative step in this, what are they looking at?
You have how the aircraft's moving, how far are they moving from where they are today. You're looking at altitude. You're looking at how many aircraft there are. And then the noise screening basically takes it all into consideration. You develop the procedure, you move aircraft onto that new procedure, and then you run the noise screening that way.
And then you're looking for some kind of final numbers on this noise screening. What are the standards? What is too noisy? And that requires you to, what numbers?
It really just depends on the area. I can't give you a specific. It really just depends on what the number is and what the amount of increase is.
Okay, so what are we measuring the amount of increase in?
Noise. The noise level. So you may have 55 dB, and it may be a 5 dB increase, and that may be a significant or maybe reportable noise in which we may have to go deeper. But you may have a 55 dB, and that 5 dB increase doesn't really affect it. It really just depends on where you're at, what's going on, and all of those things. So really, I can't give you specifics because it just depends on what the decibel level is and what the increase is of that decibel.
And does it matter if they're going over this residence over here that's getting a lot slammed by the airport already versus this residence over here that's only getting slammed once in a while? Does it matter what the overall noise level is at those test sites, if you will, the modeling sites?
I'm trying to see if I can understand what you're saying. So if you already have a bunch of aircraft over there, you have a baseline. So it's going to take that baseline, and then you're going to move whatever that baseline is to the new procedure, and then it's going to run. So you have whatever that baseline is what you start out with. So if they're already at 55 dB, then that's where you're going to start, and then the increase would be on top of that. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying, but it's hard for us to understand because we don't have access to these charts. And does DNL play a role in it? The DNL metric play a
Yes.
role?
Yes,
What role does
day-night
that-
levels, yes.
How does that work into the mix?
That's for, mainly it's with the noise screening itself. We have to allow more for nighttime operations, more dBs, that type of stuff. So that's what we have to use as a standard is day-night DNL.
Okay.
How that specifically works in the system, I don't know because I don't I didn't develop it. All I know is this is what we use to run it. So the specifics of how it calculates and computes and all that, I don't have that answer. It's all in a computer generated system.
So is the noise screening that you're talking about part of the modeling? Is that the
No,
end?
modeling doesn't happen unless you get higher up. It's a noise screening.
Hey, Joe, you mind if I take a stab at this?
Sure.
So the noise screening tool is essentially a spreadsheet exercise to determine whether there is enough change in noise level, and uses the DNL, or in California it's the CNL noise metric. Actually, no, I think FA just uses the DNL metric, so I'll take that back. It uses the DNL metric as a basis. So if the spreadsheet exercise, which is a noise screening tool, doesn't show significant change, and Joe's right, there's no like definite number that's put on it as to whether you need to go further or not, but there's a sense of, from modelers that do this, if there is a certain amount of change, it would trigger them to do more noise modeling.
Yeah.
So that's what the noise screening tool is. It's just a tool because if you get zero change, you don't need to do more modeling. If you get 10% change, maybe you need to do the modeling at that point. But there isn't no guidance that says at this level of change, you need to do more modeling. I will say the FAA is relatively conservative. If there's much change at all, they would then go do more extensive modeling. I hope that helps.
Yeah, and if there are changes, normally we would go out, get with the airport at the very minimum and say, hey, here's what we're seeing. What are your thoughts on this? And then maybe it's going back to the drawing board. We go back to the table and see what we can do there.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Yep.
Anyone
Okay,
else?
so I'll go. Oh, I'm sorry. Does somebody else have something?
No, you're good. Thank you.
Okay. So this is just kind of a flow chart. It's probably pretty hard to see, but you start the process, you go to preliminary technical review, then it goes to, or you can go environmental review, then it goes down to the internal review to determine level of NEPA. So that's where they kind of go through it and say, hey, what can we do? What do we need to do? And then at that point, it's determined whether they need to do, they can do a CADX, an EA, or an EIS, and then there's the different steps. So if you do an EA and there's significant impacts, then you automatically have to go to an environmental impact statement. And then there's the process for that. If you don't have it, then you can go to extraordinary circumstances. If it's no, then you just go down and do, you proceed with the procedure. So it's just kind of a flow chart of kind of how we walk through the process.
Would you say that CADX probably would satisfy the review most of the times, or
Yeah.
how often do you get from CADX to EA?
Yeah, I would say probably out of the stuff that we do, I would say probably 90% of them are done under CADX. And that might be low, honestly. But I would say I'd feel comfortable saying 90%.
Thank you.
And then this is kind of a conceptual timeline. So this is kind of goes to what Kathleen was asking earlier about the surfer offload, or whatever we want to call that procedure. So this is kind of just a timeline that we kind of run through. So you have the approval process. And again, the numbers in here are just estimated. There are times where it takes longer. There are times where it's shorter. But this we kind of just developed as a kind of a, if everything goes good, this is kind of what we're looking at. So you have the approval process. Then it goes to the flight procedures team for final review and design. Then it goes to environmental, which is up here at the top. And then you kind of just start going down. Final design, then you go to procedure development, then you go to the waivers. So procedure development, it kind of, final design is where, so it goes to environmental. Environmental's done, then it goes back to FPT. They do the final, everything's finalized. So the final design's done. They put the environmental with it. They do whatever else paperwork they need to do. All of that is done and then gets sent up to AIS. Then AIS does procedure development, and that's where they do their quality control, the flight inspections, all of that stuff is all done there. Then it goes down. If you have, you'll have the flight validation process. So in other words, they'll look at it, say, yeah, it's safe to fly. If there's any waivers that were required, that's where the waiver approval will come in. We don't have that. Well, we have that sometimes, but it's not super, it's not really all the time. Then you have the final package, all that's buttoned up, and then it goes to implementation, and available for use. And then you have the post-implementation, which is like I described earlier, where they make sure the procedures are working effectively. They do what they want. That you know, there's no changes that are needed. It meets air traffic needs, and all of that stuff. So that's all done in the post-implementation. And from start to finish, we're looking at about 2 to 3 years. Right now, I think it's more towards the 3 years, just because we have so much stuff going on and delays and stuff like that. So, but normally it's between 2 and 3 years from the time it's entered in the gateway to the time it gets implemented, is between 2 and 3 years.
Any questions on this one? Okay,
Just very general, not details. So like not to make a pun, but a 30,000-foot view. What does a procedural waiver mean?
It could be that, let's say, we want to do on a procedure. Why is this not working? Something's not working. We could do let's say we want to do a procedure that has an increased climb gradient, and we aren't gonna, and it's not required because of terrain. Well, then we would go and say, hey, is it possible to get a waiver for this? And then they would have to look at it, and then they would make the determination. Can we do it? Can we not do it? Then, you know, another situation might be, let's say you need a certain distance between 2 waypoints, and you won't meet that criteria. However, it works for industry and everyone else. So then they might be able to go and say, hey, can we get a waiver and maybe not meet that criteria from that criteria leg length, so that we can make that waypoint a little bit closer that works better for industry and all of that. So I'm sure there's tons more. I'm not in that area, so I don't know them all, but those are the ones that I've heard, some of those. But that's kind of what would be waived is those type of things. And believe me, nothing that we waive is going to cause any safety issues. That's pretty much why you're going to ask, right? And they have experts that look at it and go, yeah, this is still safe. Or they'll say, a lot of times they'll say, no, we're not doing that. You're going to have to find another way around it. And then that's what they do.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Gene, I don't know. Do you have any other examples that you've seen? You've been around for a while.
No, but I think that example was good.
Okay.
I do have others, but I think it explains, you know, the waiver
Okay,
process.
perfect. Okay, so real quick, if I may, I'm just going to kind of show for those of you that don't, and if you think I'm wasting time, then please let me know and I'll stop. So I'm sharing my screen again, so let me know when you see it.
we see it.
So this is the public view of the IFP gateway. So it's the Instrument Flight Procedures Gateway. And as you can see here, here's the procedures for San Francisco. I've actually selected it here. But what you would do when you come on here is you would enter your airport here, so SFO, and then hit go, and then it would come up with all this stuff, right? So right here is where I was talking about. You can come to this web page, click this and it would notify you of any changes at SFO that hit the gateway. So whenever they go to the public in the gateway, you'll get a notification in your email that, hey, there's new information on the gateway. And then you'll be able to come in here and look. These are the current procedures, what you see on this page. And then like Kathleen was alluding to earlier, these are the changed ones that list what's being changed. They list what the scheduled pub date is. That's what we're hoping to publish it on. Sometimes we make it, sometimes we don't. But that's what this column is talking about. So as you can see, there's some in here that are under development for July publication date and stuff like that. So this is a good tool for you guys, especially the Roundtable members, if you haven't already, to sign up, and then you'll get notifications on changes that are upcoming in the future. And with that, I will stop. So normally what we try to tell folks are, if let's say you as the Roundtable want to submit a procedure change, what we recommend is that you get with the airport, San Francisco Airport, and you work with them to get that put in. The reason why is kind of twofold. Number one, it lets the airport know, hey, this is what we want to do, right? So they kind of know what's coming. And number two, they do these fairly regular, so they know exactly how to do it. General public, there are some out there that would know how to fill in, what to put in all the boxes and all of the things, but I would say majority of people don't. So we always recommend that you reach out to the airport and have the airport assist you in putting in that gateway request. And like I said, it's twofold. Number one, the airport knows it's coming, right? So then it shouldn't be a shock when we go to them and say, hey, we got this request. What are your thoughts on it? Then hopefully they'll be like, yeah, we know about it. We're okay. Go ahead and move. And then we move forward. And I'll stop there and see if there's any more questions.
Thank you, Joe, for your presentation. Let's go around the room. If there's anyone here in the room have any further questions. After that, I'll go ahead and open up to public comment. Okay. Gene?
Yes, I just wanted to clarify something on the noise screening process. I think I had mentioned the 65 DNL. For air traffic procedures, they actually look out beyond the 65 out to, I believe, the 45. So I might have misspoke a little bit that it's really keyed into the 65, but it is within the 65 where you get the significant impacts, but they're looking out to the 45 for less than significant. So even if they get something that they don't like with the noise screening tool out that far, they could still decide one of two things, right? Go back to design, try to eliminate that from being an issue, or do more modeling AEDT. So I just wanted to, I think it could have been assumed that it was all within the 65, but for air traffic procedures, they actually do look out beyond 65, and the screening tool takes account of that.
Thank you, Gene. Before I move to public, so nobody here got any further questions. We're gonna go ahead and move to public. Before we do that, I want to thank SFO for entering our proposed procedure into the IFP gateway. Much appreciated.
Happy to do that.
Thank you. And now that going back to you, do you have any member of the public? I don't have anyone here in the room from the public that would like to speak. Do you have anyone on Zoom?
Yes, Chair, we have 2 remote participants, now 3 participants. So I'm going to start with Darlene. Okay. Darlene, you have 2 minutes to speak. Let me start my timer. Hold on for a second. Let me share. The screen. Timer. Share.
Thank you, Mr. Bert, for your presentation. I will share a community-centric perspective of the FAA processes. For the FAA, community typically means the airport represents the residents. Understandably, the airport has different interests than the community. The .41 process for procedure development does not provide a seat at the table for the community, like a community technical consultant. Former Representative Spears' proposed bill required a community technical rep other than the airport at FAA procedure design meetings, but the bill did not pass, so there is no seat at the table for the community on procedure design meetings, trade-offs, options, etc. for phase 1. Community engagement is listed in all of the PBN phases except implementation. Yet most of the activities in the FAA's Community Engagement Manual 2016 are optional, not required, and are not truly engagement. As stated by the FAA's Next Gen Advisory Group, June 2015, community engagement pursues community understanding and acceptance instead of meaningful dialogue to address negative impacts of past FAA actions and future FAA actions before decisions are made. For NEPA, the FAA interprets significant impact using DNL. Unfortunately, the DNL metric is inadequate and does not reflect how people experience noise, like the number of flights. Using the FAA's review process, every next-gen Metroplex, including the NorCal Metroplex, was determined to have a finding of no significant impact. This means the negative next-gen that started in 2015 were never considered under the PBN process, despite the fact that the FAA moved ground tracks, dispersed operations, and so on. We are hopeful that the FAA update to its noise policy will address the process issues I shared and truly reflect the 21st century aviation impacts.
Thank you, Ms. Chair.
Chair, second speaker is Jennifer. Jennifer, you have 2 minutes.
You might
Can
need
you,
to tell her to unmute.
Jennifer, can you unmute?
Start off.
Can you unmute her?
Just unmuted me.
Okay, I just got the sign to be unmuted. Okay. Can you hear me now?
We can
Yeah.
hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you, Joe, for your presentation. I'm going to take a step back and just say a few things. It's fair to say that without the NEPA process, we probably wouldn't know anything that the FAA is doing. It is a law. It's an independent law from the FAA. So the FAA has to comply with NEPA. And from various presentations, we've heard about NEPA, and I have actually participated in one at the symposium that was mentioned earlier. It is a disclosure law. And yes, it started in 1970, but the principles in this law are about letting the public know what could happen to their environment. And recently, California passed a anti-greenwashing law that has to do more with emissions. But I want to read what it says. Greenwashing is the act of or practice of making a product, policy, or activity appear to be more environmentally friendly or less environmentally damaging than it really is. Clearly, we have a gap in terms of how the FAA does screening and what information is being relayed to us. I'd love to know more about reportable noise, because what we heard about reportable noise is just, basically you report it in an EA. But if you're not going to have an EA or an EIS, none of these great tickets and vouchers help us. The GAO report, General Accountability Office report, does not help us if an EA or an EIS isn't done. And as a matter of fact, the GAO looked at 13 sites, but the majority of all the work that the FAA does is at CADX. So we clearly have a very big gap in terms of the information that the public has to have. It's a very different angle than engagement. It's about giving us the information about our environment, which affects not physical and mental health. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Chair, we have one more, and that's Mary Jo. Mary Jo, you have 2 minutes. Please unmute your speaker.
Thank you. CATEX is not a rigorous evaluation of impacts. It's a back of the envelope evaluation. There is no noise modeling, as Jean said. It's noise screening tools and a questionnaire. And it's used 95% plus of the time. And let's use a real example that you're familiar with. Pirate, the oceanic arrival, was implemented with a CATEX, even though the ground track changed, not only because the waypoint was changed to ARG, minor change, but also the heading when it, after ARG today, was changed. The Pirate CATEX should never have been approved. The FAA claimed that community supported Pirate. SFO never supported the Pirate proposal. We checked with them. The FAA also filed the CATEX with a 140 degrees heading after the waypoint ARG. However, that default heading published in the Pirate navigation chart after the CATEX had been approved was changed to 160 degrees. That's a ground track change. You change a heading, that's new ground track. So a rigorous evaluation of Pirate should have been done. Unfortunately, under the current rules that the FAA used, the conclusion would still have been no significant impact because the DNL change would have been less than 5 dB, which is the trigger point for the FAA to declare a significant impact in our areas which are affected in a 45 to 60 dB DNL. So we would still have lost. However, it was flawed, it was incorrect, and there was a noise impact. And if you don't realize, but a 5 dB increase in DNL is hundreds of planes over people's head. That's significant impact. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fremont. Going back here to the room, if there's any other comments or questions being on Zoom. Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Bert, for your presentation and for your engagement with us today. A lot of good information, and this is being recorded, so it'll be accessible to the members and members of the public as well on the Roundtable website. So it'll be available for those who would like to review it. Thank you so much, Joe, again. All right, moving on, our next item on the agenda, item number 2. We're gonna go to Mr. Ganoung, who has covered some of his topics at a previous meeting, but time did not allow completion, so hopefully we will continue with this presentation today about the flight procedure in the Bay Area and examples of actual flight tracks, and review many of the charts from the director report. Bert, it's all yours.
Thank you, sir. I'll go ahead and make a couple of adjustments here. And the biggest one of which is, come on, the presentation screen. So we'll share that.
And while you're preparing, my understanding is you will take questions that you present, or you would be like it.
I would be happy to,
Oh,
sure.
perfect. Thank you. So members, if you have any questions, please let me know.
So at our last meeting, we wrapped up on the charts, aircraft noise level details. And we're getting ready to move on. On this one, I have the third page, which is our little housekeeping here on my screen, so I can keep track with you guys. This item here, it goes ahead and reviews the aircraft noise levels in the summary page. And nope, sorry, back them up, wrong direction. Yeah. Sorry. We are on to the monthly report for the operations at the oh, come on. Let's go back. There we are. So at the top, you can see the oops, get off that. There we go. You can see monthly operations, average daily operations, the 12-month average operations, year-to-date growth. And then in the chart here, you're going to see arrivals and departures depicted separately. We have the count on the left by hour. So it's an average by day, an hour in this chart here. And the ebb and the flow here is based on the scheduled operations of the airlines. I need to emphasize that the airport does not control this. It is the airlines solely that control this. The image up here shows our arrival and departure routes. We'll get into that a bit more in a moment. The top destinations, we can go ahead and show those. So Los Angeles, JFK, and Seattle are the big ones in June of 2023. We show down the bay visual versus the bodega arrival, which again are these two right here. This one's the down the bay. And this one is the bodega over the peninsula. The FAA is very, very, very adamant that we try to use the correct terms for these, mainly because it confuses them when we just say bodega. Well, is it down the bay or down the peninsula? And so if it's down the bay, it's down the bay. If it's down the peninsula, then it is truly the bodega. The other arrival routes we have are, and this is the bodega, diamond, surfer, and pirate listed out in how often they were used in June. The departures we have here with gap, stick, night, trucking for runways 1 left and right, and 28 left and right. Trucking can go out on both runways. And then the airlines with the most operations, obviously the 800-pound gorilla at SFO is United. SkyWest, subsidiary of United, I guess you might say, is a regional carrier. Alaska, Delta, American, and Southwest. The type of aircraft, the splits here in this little image that you can see with the airplanes and the helicopter. The most utilized aircraft types, specifically Boeing 737 with 31%, and then Airbus A320, 18%, so on down just for the top few. And then we have daily aircraft operations. We're looking at the operations by day of the month at the bottom of the page. Actually, I should ask, do I have any questions through the chair at this page?
Thank you. Any questions for Bert on this slide?
Pretty self-explanatory on
Not
this one.
seeing none.
Not as bad as the previous one. I was able to stump a few people on that one. The runway usage and nighttime operations, real simple. We're looking here on the first one, top left, runway utilization for arrivals and departures. We tell everybody that runway 28's the dominant runway left and right at SFO for arrivals. It's true, it is, and you can see it right there. Departures, we kind of get a bit of a mix. A lot of the operations do use runway 1 left and right, 59%. And then we have a few 10 operations that month, just 2. And then 28 left and right going to the west. The reason for that typically is that SFO operates best with a left-right type principle. And so with the runway 28 arrival with a 1 departure is a good operation. When we get to 28 and 28 departures and arrivals, slows things down. And so we like to periodically let people know about that. We get over here, we show the runway utilization for arrivals under the 28s for the split. You can see it here. The nighttime power run-ups. So if you can imagine, an aircraft gets sent in for maintenance, say an engine vibration or a leak or something like that. The mechanics will then service the aircraft. Sometimes they actually need to go out and power it up to test that they have cured the problem, say a vibration. And so they will go out and run up the engine to the power setting necessary to check it, verify, and then put it back into service. Much like your mechanic, when you take your car in, will drive it around the block to make sure that it's fixed. Doesn't have that problem anymore. And so at nighttime, if they want to go out and do it, we ask that the airplane's going out first thing in the morning, basically. And that they, if it is going out later in the day, that they service it and check it later in the day rather than at night. The run-up locations are actually on the far side of the airfield. You can see here's runway 1 nearest the community. This is the bay out here on the map. And we have the 2 run-up pads here with a alternate out here off the 2/8. That one is used to during wind change. The 2 dominant ones are these 2 with the tail facing over the bay. And so it's as little disturbance as possible for the community. The chart down at the bottom, we're looking at the hourly nighttime operations. The figures are showing 12 through 5 a.m. and you can see how many operations occurred. And we're also looking at the days of the month.
So
Any-
that question, Bert.
Please.
What determines what area has been used for the engine run-up?
Well, first of all, these 2 run-up pads out here, there's extra concrete here versus asphalt. For a long run-up, they will want to go there. We don't want them burning up the asphalt. They'll melt it on some of the engines. Also, too, it's a safety area. It's away from most of the operations and away from vehicular traffic. And the obvious one, as I mentioned earlier, it's a quieter area being out on the bay and facing the direction they do.
Thank you.
Yes. Next. So our last page is our noise reports. You can see that we report noise reporters versus noise reports by Roundtable city in the top portion, and then other cities. We do this so that Roundtable members can go direct to their city and look at the numbers. We report them specifically this way rather than just saying, Siri, thank you. Sorry about that, everybody. The numbers used to be reported in just how many by city. And we thought it better that it be brought in where we're looking at how many reporters are giving these numbers. So in some cases, you can see we had El Granada with 1 reporter, gave us 1,301 reports. So it helps people better understand what's going on. When you get down to the likes of Palo Alto down here, there are 115 people giving us 22,527. So it gives a balance to the numbers that are being reported. The image over here shows density of reports up and down the peninsula and across the bay. They're visible as well. The other one that I like to run through is this list in the middle. Just some figures. We have some average annual reporters, 535. The average reports, 94,000. The Number of reporters, new reporters, we got 25. The top reporters, top city for new reporters, San Francisco, South San Francisco. The furthest report, again, 64 miles away, gives you sort of a perspective, rented lips today. And then reports on the SFO operations, per SFO operation, we're looking at about 3. And then aircraft types with the big ones. So the Airbus A320 was the top garnering aircraft type of complaints, followed by the Boeing 737 and then the Embraer 175. And then the top flight numbers. These are the 3 top flights that regularly receive noise reports. Down in the lower left, we're looking at noise reports by airport. Since we do take reports from anyone and we don't throw out any of our complaints, as has been stated in the past by some, we do have reports for other airports such as San Jose, Oakland, Palo Alto, and let's see, we got, my goodness, I can't even read that, it's so tiny, even zooming in on it. But we do have those reported here. The chart in the bottom right's the hourly noise reporters average day in a month, and you can see we're looking at number of reports at night, in day, and evening. So every hour we're showing how many. The any questions on this page?
Any question? Before we can proceed, I just
I just one quick,
Please.
they, a lot of data, and I appreciate it, thanks for going through it all. Is the data that you're presenting or we're presenting through these monthly reports, is that comparable to data being reported elsewhere around the country at different airports? Is there some?
It varies, airport specific typically. So what we have in our noise reports here is stemming from what we have set up as noise abatement procedures. Trying to make sure things like run-ups happen don't happen late at night if they don't have to, daytime only. Runway use, voluntary, yes, but we report it. So all these items are things that we have worked out with the FAA, worked out with the Roundtable, and worked out with the community over time.
So these are clearly customized to us.
Yes,
right?
sir.
Which makes sense. Is there a listing, or do you track requests for data that we're not providing? Is there some commonality of data that people are asking for that we're not providing?
I think we're giving them more than they're asking for at the moment. But with that said, we have had people in Palo Alto say that they recommend that we look at things different. So instead of doing it this, we do it that way. And so those are maybe some options that the technical working group might want to consider going into the future. Another thing too is we're talking about updating our fly quiet. And with the update to that, you may want to leave the director's report and or move it. Keep in mind that the fly quiet is typically quarterly. And so that would change from a monthly to a quarterly.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. So before we proceed, I just want to be respectful of everyone's time. Our time is pretty much up, but I would like, if there's no objections, to kind of let Bert finish this. We got interrupted a couple of times.
All right.
How much time do you think you might have?
I'll be very quick
Yeah.
and we'll make it through.
Okay, got a question for you on this slide. On those like top flight numbers that we keep getting a lot of
Yes.
reports on. Is there any action, first of all, like as far as communication with those airlines? Number one. Number
Definitely.
two, is there anything that really could be done to address this?
The first one specifically, Korean Airlines 214, no. We've actually met with them. We've met with their flight ops. They actually brought over some management types from Korea. And we met with them, talked with them about it, and they said, We're flying the Boeing 747-800, the quietest type of that aircraft there is. We have to do it at that time of day. And we're following the procedure as charted. We're not speeding. We're doing exactly what the FAA tells us, and we don't get off of the procedure. So based on all of that, that aircraft's doomed to be a problem child. Or that flight, I should say.
Is that one of our 2 or 3 a.m. flights
It is.
during the gap departure?
Arrival.
So.
Arrival.
Choices other than changing the time of day, which.
Yeah, it's definitely an arrival. And so they were first sort of shocked that we wanted to talk to them about this because they're flying the quietest and doing everything they're supposed to, and we just couldn't understand why. But yes, we definitely talk with the airlines. We reach out to them periodically and see what we can do about it. Hey, is there anything we could do differently? We've actually thrown out maybe fly up the coast, come in over the Golden Gate Bridge, drop down the bay. That's a lot of air miles. And they're like, well, thank you, but no, we don't want to do that. So we're still looking for other procedures we can try and work on them.
Thank you.
This one, our newest page to the director's report. I believe everybody's very familiar with the night hush request. The images at the top of the page here show in yellow the westbound night hush, which is what this was really set up to evaluate and make sure that the airlines are doing. Flights headed south, we have both of these, the yellow and the green, are the ones we're looking at in particular. And in this reporting, we're looking at catching aircraft that do the orange and not doing the night hush, and I should clarify, night is the SFO departure, hush is the open departure. And we report on those down here by month. We look at all of the procedures the airlines are using in the bar chart here. And those are color coded to match the arrow indicators. A lot of people are like, well, hey, how come we had so many that were doing the candles and the sticks down the peninsula? And now we're not seeing a whole bunch of night and hush departures. Well, we do have alternate procedures. So these gray lines, the purple lines, the big crux is we get them out over the bay and keep them off the community. And so as long as they're doing that, I'm not going to go say, hey, I want you to fly 25 extra air miles. And so I'll back off and let them do their thing. The airlines started figuring out to talking with the FAA. We ended up sharing it with a couple of the other airlines. So we're doing pretty good on getting the airlines there. We noticed here for June, we had 8 stick departures and 5 candles that flew over the peninsula. We reported out to the roundtable in the spreadsheet, talked to the FAA on those, and we see about getting more training for the controllers and also getting the word out to the airlines. They won't take it. Most of these are really right at the 1 o'clock hour. So it's scheduled at 12:50 or whatever. They sit there on the runway and finally they push the throttles up at 1:00 in 50 seconds or 1:02, something like that. And that's why they get caught for most of them. Here's an airport layout map. We're gonna show you the runways. Keep in mind this up here is the compass rose for us. Our runways are labeled 10 degrees off of true north. And so you can see that here. The runways are labeled 1 for 0, 1, 0. You subtract the last digit off of the runway, and that you get your compass heading. So 0, 1, 0 would be 10 degrees off of true north. Runway 10 is 10 degrees off of 090 due east. 19, 10 degrees off of 190 which is south. And then west, 280 is 10 degrees off of 270. And then going with that, we have, oh, I should also touch on our run-up areas over here. The Echo Lima run-up pad here, they're not seeing my cursor. Well, they're supposed to. Oh, I'm so sorry about that. Well, that's why we use this mouse. All right. So I'm gonna go up here. The Echo and Lima run-up pads and the Victor Lima. I'm wondering if it's this. I moved it.
No, you can move it.
You can see it with this mouse.
Yeah, but no, not this one. Ah, it is this one. Somehow it got a hold of that. And all right, either way. So we'll go back here. Anyhow, technology eludes us again. The flight operations here, we're looking at west flow, which is our most typical arrival and departure pattern for all of the Bay Area airports. Now, is this all of the procedures arriving and departing into the Bay Area? No. Is this the dominant ones? Yes. So for SFO, we can see we have the stick here hiding under the open candles. We have the transitions going out east, due south and southeast. We have the easterly departures on the truck end and the night go out up here. The next that we have are the southeast plan. So when the weather shifts and we go into reverse flow, this is what you will see, something like this, and where the aircraft would be or should be. I have here, it's kind of hard to see with the very light blue on the screen, but these are all of our arrivals. And our arrivals, coming down from the top here are the Bodega. The splits into the down the bay, as I mentioned earlier. We have the Diamond coming in from the east. The Surfer, and this is working around the clock. In the 6 o'clock position, we have the Surfer. Coming in from the south. From the west, we have the Oceanic arrivals, also known as the Pirate. The SFO departures will go into the Stick, which comes off of runways 1, comes down the peninsula, transitions east and south. The night, used typically at night, starting at 10 p.m., goes up the bay and avoids the open hills, was the agreement, which is the reason why that came to be. The trucking is a procedure that goes over the Oakland Hills and due east, or northeast, I should say, in this trend view. The gap departure, which is used by the heavy aircraft to the west, it goes out like that. And then we show here the Santana, which goes out the gap, comes back over the Golden Gate Bridge, and then either north or east. And with that, we've made it through.
Thank you very much, Bert. Any questions for Bert? Being none in the room, let me go over to members of the public. If we have anyone who would like to comment or ask questions about item number 2. I don't have anyone here in the room. Do we have anyone on Zoom? I believe we have Ms. Fremont that has her hand up.
Okay.
Can we unmute Ms. Fremont?
Mary Jo, I will share my screen and you have 2 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay. From a community perspective, the goals of the airport director's report are threefold. One, represent as accurately as possible the total noise impacts as experienced by affected communities. Two, show how the noise impacts are changing. And three, present the content in an actionable format. SFO made great progress in the last year or so by using ANIM to improve the accuracy of the noise events data and by reporting and above. Yet there is more to do to fulfill these goals. Ask yourself first whether you can tell from the current report what are the noise impacts for each community, whether these noise impacts are changing, and what actions you could take based on the reported data. Then look at each graph or table in the report and ask yourself, first question, what is this graph or table telling me? In particular, is it telling me which communities are impacted and by how much? Two, do I see what's changing? In other words, is it getting better or worse? And three, can I identify some next steps? If you cannot tell which communities are affected and by how much, what is changing, and what actions you could pursue, then the current report is not helping you help communities. But the report could do that. It is doable, the data exists. So if you're committed to improving the report because you do not find what you need, then you should consider creating an ad hoc subcommittee with just a few members and then collaborate with knowledgeable community members for input. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else on that?
We have no more speakers.
Thank you so
Chair.
much. With that, I'm gonna go ahead and thank Bert again one more time for that, and probably request Kathleen, if we could pass someone from IT to kind of put the two or three, we did 3 segments or 3 segments.
Well, we were set up for 3. We didn't do the middle one.
2, okay, so we could probably stitch them together and have them on the website as one, so it'll be readily available, other than people jumping to different meetings.
Absolutely.
Thank you. With that, we're gonna move on to item number 3, adjournment. We're gonna go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Thank you for being patient. I apologize for running over time. Thank you, everyone. Good night.